My son called me in the evening and said, "I'm getting married tomorrow. Your car and house have been sold. Bye." At that moment, I was lying in the hospital and replied, "Okay, but you forgot something." He asked what I meant. I laughed out loud because the house he sold was actually mine. Before we continue, please tell us what country you are from and how old you are. We love getting to know our audience. Enjoy listening. April rain had been drumming on the windows since morning, as if someone up above had decided to wrap the city in a gray veil for the whole day. Spring in Springfield is rarely sunny, and the lake seems to have agreed with the sky to share its water. I'm sitting in the kitchen, making myself a cup of tea, my usual Earl Grey, no sugar, with a drop of milk. The cup has long since cooled, but I can't bring myself to get up. I watch the raindrops run down the glass, leaving trails behind them, as if someone were quietly drawing something invisible. I've lost count of how many rainy mornings I've experienced in this house. My name is Mary Johnson, and in 3 days I'll be 68. Almost my entire life, 40 years, was spent within the walls of Springfield High School, where I taught mathematics. How many generations have passed through my hands? How many times have I tried to explain to children that mathematics is not only numbers, but also order, logic, beauty? And now there is silence, retirement. At first, it seemed like a long-awaited respite. But now this silence sometimes weighs so heavily that I don't know where to go. It's an ordinary day, Tuesday. I should go to the store, tidy up, maybe if the rain calms down, I'll go to the library. Everything as usual. But somewhere in the back of my mind, like a pulse, is the thought of my approaching birthday. Another one, possibly alone. Suddenly, the phone rang. The number was not identified. I picked up the phone anyway. At my age, you never know, it might be important. Mary Johnson? An unfamiliar female voice. This is Glamour Salon, Springfield. We would like to confirm your appointment for tomorrow at 10 in the morning. I was confused. I hadn't made any appointment. I opened my mouth to say that it must be a mistake, but then I stopped. What if it was a sign? Maybe fate was trying to give me a little nudge? Why not go? A little pampering before my birthday certainly wouldn't hurt. Yes, of course, I replied. I'll be there. After the call, I went up to my bedroom and opened the closet door. Everything was as usual: strict suits, dark skirts, cardigans. All restrained, practical. The wardrobe of a teacher accustomed to discipline. And suddenly my gaze fell on a dress, blue, delicate, slightly flowing. George gave it to me on our last anniversary. It matches your eyes, he said then, smiling slightly. I took it out, held it up to myself, and looked in the mirror. Yes, there were more wrinkles, and my hair was now completely gray. But my eyes remained the same. George passed away 10 years ago, suddenly, of heart failure. We had just started planning our summer, wanted to go to Boston, walk along the Mississippi River, and in the morning I woke up, and he was gone. Sometimes it seems like it was yesterday. And sometimes it seems like it was in another life. The house still remembers him. All those shelves, the table, the bench in the garden, everything he ever touched. He was an engineer, but he really enjoyed making things at home. Sometimes, when it gets really empty, I start talking to him out loud. What do you think, Fedya? I said that day, carefully hanging the dress back up. They're coming for my birthday. They are my son Greg, his wife Susan, and their 2 children, Emily, 16, and Ethan, 12. We hadn't seen each other for 3 months, since Christmas. Back then, I called them myself and asked to visit. The evening turned out cold. Everything seemed polite, but not genuine. The smiles were forced. The conversations were superficial. Susan made no attempt to hide her irritation. Greg was constantly distracted, and the children sat on their phones, occasionally answering me in monosyllables without looking up. But when he was little, Greg was my sunshine. We were very close. I helped him with his homework, drove him to practice, read to him before bed. George even joked sometimes that I spoiled him because he was like me. But when Greg went to high school, everything changed. He fell in with the wrong crowd. His personality became rude, his grades plummeted. We tried to guide him, to keep him on track. It was difficult, but he pulled through. He went to college and got a degree in finance. George and I were so proud. And then Susan came along. Beautiful, businesslike, determined. They met at the insurance company where they both worked. The wedding was lavish, with so many guests that I didn't even see half of them. Even then, I felt that Tamara considered as strangers. After George's death, it became even more difficult. My son seemed to be there for me at the funeral, helping me. But then he seemed to disappear. He immersed himself in his work and his family. He called less and less. He visited less and less. Last year, they didn't even call on my birthday. Susan sent a text message. Happy birthday, Mary Johnson. Greg is in a meeting, the kids are busy. We'll call later. But they never called. The rain outside the window grew heavier, and I decided not to go to the store. Better to tidy up. I washed the floors, cleaned the stove, even washed the windows, even though it was raining. I worked in silence, not giving myself time to think. I didn't want to think about how my whole life was now confined to these four walls. That my son didn't seem to remember I existed. That my grandchildren were growing up with almost no idea who I was to them. When I was done, I took out the photo albums. Here he is, my boy taking his first steps. Here he is in his graduation suit. Here we are on our last family trip to the lake. George was still with us then. I tried to find the moment when everything fell apart. I couldn't find it. I guess it all happened gradually, drop by drop. The doorbell distracted me from my memories. I wasn't expecting anyone. Standing on the doorstep was Helen Brown, my neighbor, my friend, perhaps my only true friend. She was holding a jar of something hot. I thought you wouldn't want to cook in this weather, she said. Here, some chicken soup. My grandmother's recipe. You can't refuse. Zoe is 72, and she is my complete opposite. Cheerful, energetic, confident. She is also a widow, but she has 3 children and 7 grandchildren. And everyone loves her, calls her, visits her. Come in, I invited her. I was just about to have some tea. We made ourselves comfortable in the kitchen. She poured the tea, and I took out the cookies I had baked yesterday. So, how are you going to celebrate your birthday? Zoya asked with a squint. I just sighed. With my family, I hope. If I can convince them to come. Come on. You forgive them too much, she muttered. I would have told them how I feel a long time ago. But I don't know how. They are all I have. Zoya looked at me intently and squeezed my hand. You have yourself, Marina. And that's a lot. Don't forget that. When she left, I stood at the window for a long time, watching her umbrella flash among the puddles. She was right. I really did let Grisha and Tamara get away with too much. Maybe I was to blame for that myself. I never insisted, never demanded. I just waited. Maybe he'll remember. But I didn't want to wait anymore. I dialed my son's number. The phone rang for a long time, and I was about to press the cancel button when he answered, Mom, something's wrong. His voice was dry, a little irritated. I tried to speak calmly. No, Greg, everything's fine. I just wanted to remind you that it's my birthday on Friday. Maybe you could come by? Even if just for an hour. Susan, the kids, there's silence on the other end. Then some sounds, as if he covered the receiver with his hand. Apparently, he's discussing it with his wife. Mom, come on. Friday is totally packed. Tamara has an event, Oksana has rehearsal, Ethan has. I understand, I interrupted. It's okay. If it doesn't work out, it's okay. Another pause. Then suddenly, well, we can come by. Around 2 o'clock. For a couple of hours. Really? I didn't immediately realize that he had agreed. That's wonderful, Greg. I'm very happy. I'll make something Ethan likes. And Emily will also. Mom, he interrupted abruptly. No need to do anything special. We'll just stop by to say hello, give him a present, and leave. We have a lot to do. Of course, I quickly agreed. Whatever is convenient for you. After the call, I couldn't sit still for a long time. For the first time in many years, they were coming, just like that, for my birthday. Not out of politeness or obligation. I understood that for them, it might just be a mark on the calendar. But for me, it was important. And I decided anyway to make it special. Not for them, but for myself. The next few days were spent preparing. I took my time, doing everything with soul, like I used to when I waited for George to come home from work. I went to the salon, the same one where I happened to have an appointment. The young hairdresser gave me a neat haircut, freshened up my hair color a little, didn't cover the gray completely, just added a soft shade to make it look natural. When she said I looked 10 years younger, I didn't believe her, of course, but I smiled anyway. Then I went to the store and bought myself a new blouse, sky blue, to match my eyes. George always said that color suited me. By that time, the house had already been cleaned to a shine. But I still mopped the floors, washed the dishes in the cupboard, and washed the tablecloths and napkins, as if I were preparing not for the arrival of my relatives, but for something much bigger. My soul wanted order, comfort, warmth. Zoya, as always, did not stand aside. Let me help, she said, standing in my hallway with a rag and some bags. I can manage on my own, honestly. Don't argue. Let an old friend do her good deed. Besides, I want to see your ungrateful son and his posh wife in person. Zoya. I tried to put on a stern face, but I laughed myself. Well, of course, they're not like that to you. And I'm not an old gossip, she muttered, waving her hand. You forgive them everything. Your whole life. On my birthday, I woke up early when it was still dark outside. The first rays of sunshine were breaking through the clouds, and I took it as a sign. After a week of rain, finally a clear morning. Maybe it really is a good omen? I took a shower, put on a new blouse, dark blue pants, applied a little eyeshadow, a little powder, just a little. Not to look younger, but just to look fresh. I looked in the mirror and suddenly felt something strange. I didn't look young or beautiful, no. But I felt visible. Not a gray shadow, not a forgotten grandmother. But a woman with a name, a history, a life. Everything was ready for dinner. In the oven, there was an eggplant casserole, the one Greg loved as a child. On the table was a chocolate cake with nuts, his favorite. A meatless salad for Oksana, if she was still a vegetarian. Homemade cookies for Ethan. Everything familiar, homemade, smelling of childhood. I set the table. Without excessive solemnity, but neatly, tastefully. A white tablecloth, clean dishes, and in the center, a vase with the first spring flowers from my garden. Closer to 2 o'clock, I began to get nervous. What if they don't come? What if everything fell through again? Or what if Greg called and said that plans had changed? I was already preparing myself for disappointment when I heard a car pull up. They had arrived. The family. For my birthday. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I took one last look in the mirror. Neat hairstyle, blue blouse, light makeup. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Happy birthday, Mom, Greg said, hugging me as if he were afraid of getting dirty, gently, barely touching my shoulders. He smelled of expensive cologne and some kind of office Hello, Mary Johnson, Susan nodded, making no attempt to hug me. A narrow face, flawless makeup, pearl earrings. Everything looked immaculate. Behind them stood the children. Emily, 16, looked at her phone without even glancing at me. Her dark, obviously dyed hair partially covered her face. Ethan, tall for his age, with teenage acne and a sullen look, looked away silently. Come in. I stepped aside. I'm so glad to see you. Emily, Ethan, how you've grown. I addressed my grandchildren. Emily muttered something without looking up from the screen. Ethan just shrugged and walked past. I felt a little uncomfortable, but I tried not to show it. I was used to hiding my pain. It smells good, Greg remarked, sniffing the air. I told you, Mom would make something. That's right, I tried to smile. Just an eggplant casserole and a cake. Nothing special. You still haven't renovated? Susan looked around, assessing the living room. We can help you find a designer. Everything here is very outdated. I feel comfortable here, I replied calmly. I have a lot of memories here. That's exactly why you need to renovate, she muttered, as if to herself. We sat down in the living room, Greg and Tamara on the sofa, the children separately, and me on a chair I brought from the kitchen. The conversation was awkward. I asked about work, school, and plans for the summer. The answers were short, boring, and interesting. Let's go to the table, I suggested when the pause in the conversation became too long. The casserole is ready. It got a little warmer at the table. Greg praised the dish. Emily reluctantly admitted that the salad was okay. Ethan even asked for seconds, though he didn't say a word. Only Susan hardly touched her food. I'm watching my figure, she explained. How's school, Emily? I tried to get my granddaughter to talk. Dad said, are you in the school play? Emily looked up from her phone and stared at me as if I were a museum exhibit. Yes, Juliet. The premiere is in 2 weeks. Juliet? How lovely. I'd love to see it. Can you take me with you? Emily glanced at her mother. She immediately intervened. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mary Johnson. We only have 4 tickets. Grisha and I and my parents. Emily is very close to her grandmother Valentina. Of course, I understand, I nodded, feeling my cheeks flush. I turned to Ethan. Do you still play soccer, Ethan? No. Now I swim without lifting my head. He muttered. Really? I didn't know. That's wonderful. Your grandfather George was an excellent swimmer when he was young. He even got a ticket to summer sports camp, Greg interjected proudly. The coach says he has great potential. Wonderful. I'm very happy for you, I smiled at my grandson. He just shrugged. Everything was distant then. Maybe not. Never now. I felt the light inside me slowly fading, the light with which I had been waiting for this meeting. Who wants cake? Chocolate with nuts, I asked, getting up. We're on a diet, Susan said hastily, putting her hand on Oksana's shoulder. And Ethan has to watch his weight because of the pool. I'd like a piece, Ethan said suddenly, and his mother immediately glared at him. A small piece, she reluctantly allowed. And then an extra workout. While I was cutting the cake, Greg came up to me in the kitchen. Mom, we won't be long. Tamara has a meeting at 5. We still have to take the kids and get changed. It stung. They had been in the house for less than an hour. And they were already getting ready to leave. Of course, I replied in an even voice. Thanks for stopping by. When we returned to the living room, Susan was already packing her bag. Emily was buried in her phone, and Ethan was poking at the cake with a fork. We're leaving, Greg announced, clapping his hands. But first, the gift. Susan handed me a box, neatly wrapped in shiny paper and tied with a ribbon. Happy birthday, Mary Johnson. We all picked it out as a family. I took the box, feeling a slight flutter of excitement. A gift is a sign of attention, after all. So, at least a little, they do care? Open it, Greg urged, and I suddenly noticed a strange gleam in his eyes. I opened it. I slowly removed the ribbon and lifted the lid. There was nothing inside. Nothing at all. An empty box. I looked up at my son. I wanted to ask something, but they were already laughing. All four of them were laughing loudly, hysterically, as if they were really enjoying themselves. An empty box for an empty woman, Greg said through his laughter. Perfect, added Susan, wiping away tears of laughter. Emily was filming my face on her phone, and Ethan was repeating empty, empty. I froze. The box in my hands, my heart aching. I couldn't wrap my head around it. Was this my family? I looked at them, holding the empty box in my hands, unable to say a word. Everything that was happening seemed like some kind of bad dream. Greg, my boy, whom I rocked in my arms, taught multiplication tables, stroked his head when his teeth hurt. Emily, my granddaughter, for whom I once knitted sweaters. Ethan, with whom we built a house out of pillows in my living room. And now they are sitting in front of me and laughing. Laughing at me. Greg, my voice sounded strange, as if it weren't mine. What was that? Mom, don't be offended. It's a joke. Greg continued to laugh, but now with less confidence. A joke? I looked at him, not believing it. You came to my birthday party with an empty box and called me a dummy. It's a joke. Mary Johnson, don't be so dramatic. Susan intervened, still with a hint of a smile. In our family, we call it dark humor. In our family. I squeezed the box so hard that it started to crumple in my hands. You and I haven't had anything in common for a long time. We have different families. And different understandings of what humor is and what respect is. The smiles on their faces slowly began to fade. Apparently, they expected me to start crying, go to the kitchen in a huff, or try to turn it all into a joke. But I didn't cry. I felt something click inside me. It was as if the door that I had been trying to keep open for years had slowly but surely closed. Mom, Greg tried to take my hand. Don't take it so hard. It's just a joke. We wanted to cheer you up a little. Cheer me up? I got up from the table. Me? On my birthday? You decided to make fun of me, and you call that cheering me up? Grandma, why are you getting so worked up? Emily muttered, without taking her eyes off her phone. But it's just a joke. I looked at her, this strange girl with dyed hair and a cold stare, and suddenly realized I knew nothing about her. And she knows nothing about me. And she doesn't want to know. You know what? I said calmly but firmly. You'd better leave. Susan, you have a meeting at 5, don't you? You shouldn't be late. They froze. Apparently, they didn't expect such a reaction. They thought I would keep quiet, as always. Swallow it, forget it, forgive it. But I just stood there with a crumpled box in my hands, and there were no tears, no resentment, only coldness inside me. Mom, Greg didn't know what to say. Thanks for coming, I said quietly. But no more. And don't call on the weekends, as you usually promise and don't do. I'm not offended. I just understand everything. I walked them to the door. No hysterics. No tears. Just cold politeness. Greg tried to say something else. Susan was already angry. Emily was silent. Ethan gave me a strange look, as if he wanted to say something, but said nothing. We'll talk about this later, Greg said as he left. Don't bother, I replied and closed the door. When the sound of their car disappeared around the corner, I slowly sank to the floor by the door, pressing my back against the wood. The box remained in my hands. Crumpled, empty. I looked at it, and their words spun around in my head. An empty box for an empty woman. A pacifier. A pacifier. Tears began to flow. I didn't cry out loud, I didn't sob. I just sat there, pressed against the door, and cried quietly. For all the years I had hoped. For all the times I had justified them. For all my nothingness, I understand, don't be offended. They just have work, children, things to do. I cried not because they hurt me, but because they were my family. My blood. My son. My grandchildren. And they so easily, without hesitation, turned my birthday into humiliation. For the sake of laughter. When the tears stopped, I struggled to get up. My knees ached, my back hurt. Age is taking its toll, especially after sitting on the floor. I went to the kitchen. I silently cleared the table. The casserole was almost untouched. So was the salad. Only a couple of pieces of cake were left. I threw everything away. I washed the dishes. I wiped the table. My movements were automatic, as if my body knew what to do while my soul had not yet departed. Then I went up to the bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed. A woman in a blue blouse, with smudged mascara and dull eyes, stared back at me from the mirror. A dummy. They called me a dummy. I am not a dummy. I am Mary Johnson. And I haven't lived an empty life. I raised a son, worked as a teacher for 40 years, created a cozy home, cherished the memory of my husband. That's not empty. That's a whole story. And I won't let them trample me like that. I took a notebook and an old address book out of the nightstand. I found a number I hadn't dialed in 7 years. Robert Miller. Lawyer. He handled George's affairs after his death. It was almost 7 in the evening. I wondered if I should call. But I pressed the button anyway. Robert Miller here, a familiar voice said. Good evening. This is Mary Johnson, George Pavlovich's wife. We haven't spoken in a long time. Of course, of course. I remember you. How are you? I'd like to make an appointment. Tomorrow. It's about my will. It's very urgent. He paused, apparently checking his schedule. I can see you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Thank you. It's very important. I hung up and took a slow breath. Something inside me ended that day. And something else began. I got up, went to the trash can, and threw away that box. Then I took off my festive blouse, changed into my housecoat, and went to wash my face. That birthday was the last one I spent waiting for their attention and love. I won't wait any longer. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. My sleep was restless, as if something inside me was turning over, giving me no peace. It was still dark outside, but I couldn't lie there any longer. I got up, brewed some strong black tea, and sat down in the kitchen by the window. Night still lingered, but a bright streak was already appearing in the sky. Dawn was coming soon. And in my head there was a strange silence. No resentment, no anger. Just silence, as if my soul had exhaled for the first time in a long time. I got ready slowly. I chose a warm cardigan, did my hair, applied a little powder. I wanted to look presentable. And yet, when I left the house, something like excitement was pounding in my chest. I had thought about a will before, but I always put it off, saying it was too early, that I would live a little longer. And now I realized it wasn't too early. I just had illusions before. Robert Miller met me in his office, the same one I remembered, with dark wood, stacks of neat papers, and a chair with worn armrests. Mary Johnson, he stood up, shook my hand, and said he was glad to see me, although, he admitted, he was surprised. I hope it's nothing serious? On the contrary. It's just time to put things in order. While I'm still of sound mind and can decide for myself who gets what. He nodded, letting me know he wouldn't ask any unnecessary questions. We sat down and he opened his laptop. Tell me. I took out the piece of paper I had hastily written before going to bed last night. I have a house, a bank account, and a small vacation home. I want to leave everything to Zoe Vasilyevna, my neighbor. We've known each other for over 30 years. She's not related to me by blood, but she's closer to me than anyone else. I've shared my grief, my joy, my loneliness, everything with her. And my son gets nothing. Not him, not his wife, not his children. Not a single ruble. Robert Miller looked at me intently. Are you sure? I'm sure. I'm not seeking revenge. I just don't want to leave what George and I built to people who think I'm a nobody. Let them build their own lives without mine. He nodded. Then we'll do everything according to the law. But keep in mind that after your death, even if the will is drawn up correctly, your son may try to contest it. By law, he is entitled to a mandatory share as the first heir. Let him try, I shrugged. At least I'll know I did everything honestly. It took almost an hour to complete the paperwork. When I signed the documents, I felt as if a heavy, dusty, long overdue old bag had been lifted from my shoulders. Now everything was settled. As I was leaving, Robert Miller stopped me. You know, you're not a frequent visitor among my clients. Usually, children come to me to sue their parents, not parents to leave everything to their children. You are a brave woman, Mary Johnson. I just smiled. Brave? No. It's just that at some point, you reach your limit. When I got home, I went to see Zoe. She was in the kitchen washing the windows. Why are you so serious? She asked, wiping her hands on her apron. I'm here on business. We sat down and I poured us some tea. I've made a will. Everything is yours. The house, the vacation house, the money. Zoe almost dropped her cup. Are you crazy? That's not why I bring you borscht. Zoe, don't start. It's my decision. Not because you give me anything, but because you were there when no one else was. Because you're a person, not just a relative on paper. She was silent for a long time. Then she covered my hand with hers. I won't leave you, Marinka. Not now, not ever. But you know I don't need anything. I do. I need to know that everything George and I created will remain with someone who won't stab me in the back. We drank tea, then Zoya went with me to the market. We bought fresh vegetables, fish, flowers. It was nice just to walk, talk, choose, feel that I was not alone. That evening, I took out my old notebooks. The ones I kept when I was teaching children. Notes, exercises, comments in the margins. Then I found letters from George. He wasn't a romantic, but sometimes he wrote notes. I'm off to work, I miss you. Don't forget to buy cream, you're the best at solving equations and cooking soup. Such simple things. But they contained everything. I read and felt that I had a real life. With love. With work. With warmth. It's just that now it's time for a new chapter. Not worse. Not scary. Just new. Before going to bed, I wrote in my notebook, if they don't respect you, don't knock on the door. Leave. Let them feel empty without you. And you will be at peace. A few days passed. I lived as usual, cleaned, cooked, went to the library, called Zoe, watered the flowers. Everything seemed calm, but inside, something felt frozen, like before a storm. I tried not to think about my birthday. I erased it from my memory. As if it had never happened. I didn't even want to touch those memories, they still stung. But on Friday evening, when it was already dark, the phone suddenly rang. The number was identified as Greg. I stared at the screen for a long time without picking up the phone. I just wanted to turn off the phone. But something inside pushed me, maybe out of curiosity, maybe out of old habit. I pressed answer. Hello? Mom, hi. His voice sounded normal, but not as confident as before. Listen, I wanted to, well, talk. I was silent. Let him talk. We, of course, went a little too far. Well, with that box. It was a bad joke. We didn't mean to hurt you. Susan already said that maybe we went too far. It's just that things are stressful right now. I'm at work, she's always busy with projects, the kids. You understand. I remained silent. Mom, he raised his voice slightly, you've always been so understanding. Well, you're not vindictive. It's just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I repeated calmly. That's when you confuse salt with sugar. But when 4 people laugh in your face, it's not a mistake. It's a choice. He fell silent. I continued. I went to that birthday party as if it were a celebration. I cooked, I cleaned. I bought food, I dressed up. And you came, like to the theater, put on a show, and left. And now they want me to understand. Mom, his voice became irritated, why are you blowing this out of proportion? Well, you're not a child, crying over a box. We came, we congratulated you, we spent time with you. And now you're offended at everyone, like a little girl. No, Greg, I interrupted. I'm not offended. I've seen the light. It's not the same thing. He fell silent again. Then he exhaled. Okay. You want us to apologize? Fine. I apologize. I think Susan doesn't mind either. The kids didn't mean any harm, of course. Can we just forget about it? Greg, I already told you calmly, I'm almost tired of it. We can forget about it when it doesn't hurt. But it hurts. Don't come here anymore. I don't need your visits or your apologies. Mom, what's wrong? Now he's getting nervous. Is this all because of the box? Are you serious? No, Greg. It's not because of the box. It's because of the way you looked at me. As if I were a burden to you. As if my presence were an inconvenience. And you, my son, and that's what hurts the most. He wanted to say something, but I was already tired. I have to go. Take care. And I hung up. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding. It was hard. Very hard. But in that heaviness there was also strength. For the first time I didn't keep quiet. I didn't smooth things over. I didn't pretend that everything was fine. I told the truth. Without shouting, without reproaches. Just as it was. The next day, Zoya knocked on my door with 2 pies and some news. Guess who was at the notary today? She said as she entered the kitchen. They say Greg came by to find out something. About the will. I just shrugged. They reacted quickly, Zoya muttered. She senses trouble. I don't care. Really? She looked at me intently. You're not like that. You hoped until the very end. I hoped, I nodded. But hope is not an obligation. If it doesn't grow, then it's not yours. We sat down to drink tea. I ate half a pie. Then I suddenly laughed. What? I imagined Susan reading the text of the will. Her blood pressure must have risen. She would have traded the house, the cottage, and even you for a Turkish furniture set. And now nothing. 0. 0 is not me, I said quietly. But you're not 0, you're a 1 with infinite meaning, Zoya smiled. I laughed. For the first time in a long time, I was truly happy. And then, when she left, I sat down by the window, poured myself a little wine, just half a glass, and turned on some quiet music. I sat in the semi-darkness, watching the sunset paint the sky over Springfield, and thought that not everything in life turns out the way we dreamed it would. But sometimes, when you finally let go, it becomes easier than it was. I was alone, but I didn't feel lonely. A couple of days later, I went to the pharmacy because my blood pressure was fluctuating, and I decided I should get my pills in advance so I wouldn't have to rush later.